Hope you are all vaccinated with the COVID vaccine. Why I'm telling you this is just recall those days when COVID vaccine was introduced and how you reacted first for COVID vaccine. And definitely it was a kind of mixed emotion, and we are all were happy like we got one solution for COVID to combat COVID in the form of vaccination. But at the same time, there was huge fear and anxiety in many people's mind. Many people feared a lot to go for vaccination to begin with. So they were very skeptical, thinking what would be the further reactions of vaccination and what harm it can create, what problems it might bring up. So there were so many questions and doubts were there in many people's mind. Many people feared. And finally, most of the people they got satisfied by seeing the trials which are going on and seeing the experience of other people. Finally, they got to know their colleagues, friends' experience. Finally, they made their mind to go for vaccination, and finally, all of us we got vaccinated. So this was the very recent experience with vaccination for all of us. Now, just imagine what would be the response when the very first vaccination was introduced into human community. Just imagine what would be the reaction of the person who took the first vaccine, and what would be the mindset of the person who gave the very first vaccination. Hi, this is Dr. Raj, creator of Mindful Achievers Academy. In this series of discussion today, I am bringing you the story of one historical name. This person is regarded as the man who saved maximum lives on this earth in the history. Yeah, this historical name is none other than Edward Jenner. Edward Jenner, the name is familiar for most of you, and today I am giving you a very brief, interesting story of Edward Jenner, and we will see like what best life lessons we can take from his life. Before getting into the details of his story, I'll tell you the biggest contribution what he gave was first scientifically proven successful vaccination against smallpox. So smallpox now it is completely eradicated, and his effort, his contribution made such a big change. Finally, the smallpox is eradicated from this whole world. So this is the biggest contribution what he gave to us. Before getting into his life story, I'll tell you something curious facts about smallpox. Smallpox is one of a very dangerous disease, very dreaded with so many dreaded complications what it had. During those days, this infection was creating so many mortalities. The rate of mortality was more than 10% during that time, and even the people who used to survive, they used to have all mutilated, disfigured, scarring on their whole body, especially on their face. And even the people who used to survive, 1/3 of them, they used to become completely blind for their whole lifetime. So this was the most worst phase of smallpox which humankind has seen. And now coming to the story of Edward Jenner. So since childhood, he had a very big tragedy in his life. So his initial days were not very easy for him, and he had lost both of his parents at the age of 5 years. And personally, Edward Jenner was a victim for terrific experiences out of smallpox. During those days, people didn't have any formal scientific approach for vaccination, but they had a very primitive method of inoculating some normal person with smallpox excretion. So in that way, people tried to make that person resistant for further smallpox infection. So that means if a normal person is there, so definitely he'll be having chances of getting into smallpox. But at least people had understood that if a person gets smallpox, then further chances of him getting into smallpox will be less. So taking this concept, what people used to do was they used to collect excretion from the person who already has got smallpox, and they used to inoculate that into some normal person with a thought that would save him with further exposure or infection with the smallpox. But it was a very primitive technique, and most of the time it used to lead to so many complications. Finally, the normal person who gets this inoculation, he used to develop severe infection with the smallpox, and it might even lead to death also in some circumstances. So this practice was very primitive and very terrific, and Edward Jenner underwent this exposure experience in his childhood days, and he was literally locked in one room which contained lot many infected people with smallpox, and it was a very bad experience what he had. Out of this bad experience, he comes to one conclusion. He decides he has to do something for eradicating smallpox. And because it was such a dreaded, complicating disease, smallpox was, and he was very much disturbed with his personal experience, and he decides he will work on it and he will make sure that this disease is eradicated from human community. And finally, he gets into his practice. He starts doing his research, and during that time, he accumulates few of the strong observation from other people. During those days, similar to smallpox, few cattle people who used to work with cattle, they were prone for getting one more infection. The infection was cowpox infection. This cowpox infection was little similar to smallpox infection, and here the observation what Edward Jenner made was, if a person gets cowpox infection, initially it will be mild and it goes away, and finally that person becomes resistant for acquiring any further smallpox infection. So he carries this observation, he works on this observation, and finally he tries to take extraction from cowpox infected person, and now he inoculates that excretion into normal person, and he tries to prove in this way he will make that person resistant for further smallpox infection. So for this experimentation, he chooses one small boy, 8-year-old boy. That boy was son of his own gardener. He calls that boy and he subjects that boy for his experimentation. So now what he does, he takes the excretion from cowpox infected person and he inoculates that material into this normal boy, 8-year-old boy. And now after he did this, that small boy develops fever and some mild symptoms, and he becomes completely well within few days, and after 2 months he exposes the same boy with smallpox infection. And now it was a historical moment for Edward Jenner and to the whole world, that the small boy had already become resistant for smallpox. He will never develop any further smallpox infection. So it was such a good contribution what he could give. So finally he gave us the solution of scientifically how we can go for vaccination and how we can prevent this deadly viral infection in human community. And with this simple research, his contribution was very huge, very immense. It opened ways and our thoughts about so many immunological mechanisms. So finally he is even considered as father of immunology. So definitely whatever he is regarded as the man who saved most of the lives in human community is not an exaggeration. So he proved that smallpox is eradicated from whole human community. With this his life, we can collect so many beautiful life lessons, and I can summarize at least 3 big lessons what we can collect from his life story. Number 1, power of emotions. See, just imagine a small boy, a very young boy, facing so many tragedies in his life, losing his parents, and personally undergoing such a very difficult situation with the smallpox. It had created such a deep, immense emotion within him, and he wanted to act. He didn't have any other choice. He had so much of determination to act on the pain what he had experienced. So he had a conviction that some other person should not undergo the pain what he had undergone. So it is such a noble thought for him. So the pain what he had undergone, he didn't want any other person to undergo the same pain. So he decides, he works on it, he dedicates his life for his work, and he comes back with such a beautiful solution for such a big problem. Finally he made smallpox eradicated from human community. So this was the first Very important lesson what we can learn. Second thing, power of observation. So the big work, what he carried out, the experimentation, what he carried out, the confidence on his work he gained out of his power of observation. So he could observe very keenly, analyze the details of both cowpox infection, smallpox infection. So he could accumulate all his minor details. He could go into the depth of analysis of the observation, and finally he came up with such a beautiful strategy. So he had such a huge confidence in his process because the power of observation was very huge. So he was very clear, this will be the result at the end of the day, and he proved it. So many of the time we come across so many bigger problems, but at the same time life gives us so many clues. It is only the thing is like we have to give our mental work to analyze each and every minute details. We have to go into the depth of the minute details. So definitely we will be able to come up with some lateral ways to find solution for the bigger problems what we are facing. And number 3, power to dare. So with his life we can see he is such a daring person. He thinks and he proves. So just imagine, he takes a small boy at the age of 8 years, he wanted to experiment on him. So it was such a very risky thing, what anybody can think. It was such a new thing, such a risky thing. But he was very clear, he was so confident on his moves, so he proved what he was thinking was right. And it is such a courageous thing. So whenever you get a new thought, definitely you require such a huge courage, and your courage should be backed up with so much of depth work and the confidence on your work. So with the life story of Edward Jenner, we can learn so many good, beautiful lessons of our life. With this, I'll conclude today's session, and keep watching and following my videos to get more these kind of success stories and success updates. Thank you.